Hi everyone, Melissa here from Embodied Pilates, and today I'd like to take you through a mobility series for your thoracic spine. We're going to be using a balance cushion as well as a yoga block. Moving that T-spine, just to give you an idea of where that is in the body. You can think about the T-spine, top being at the base of the neck, all the way down between those shoulder blades and landing at the last rib, the 12th rib. So we're going to focus quite a bit on the low T-spine, segments 11 and 12, and I might be referencing those, that low T-spine area, in our little session today. So the block we need for the second portion, for the first bit, we just need our balance cushion. So you're going to set yourself up in a hook lying position. You can add a little towel under the back of your head or a little pillow for head support. And we're going to take a moment and just landmark where the back of our body is connecting to the ground. So specifically, can we feel the back of the pelvis anchored on the mat, on the floor? And can we feel the back base ribs or the lower rib cage gently connected to that floor? And really the emphasis on the back bottom ribs or low T-spine is for us to consider how much contact we have there and how full or rounded the ribs are at the lower thoracic area. So we're going to try to round those out a little bit more, create a little more space back there, and hopefully that's going to improve how we feel in our low back, in our breathing, and likely even our neck and shoulders. So let's take that balance cushion and you're going to slide it under the back of your pelvis and settling onto that balance cushion with a few intentional breaths. You want to make sure that the position of the cushion is under the back of the pelvis, but that the low back is off the mat, and those back bottom ribs are sinking towards the mat. They're not touching, you're just inviting them to be easy and soft. So with an inhale, you're going to fill up your lungs, front, sides, and back. Just doing that a few times, using that inhale to expand the ribcage three-dimensionally. Sometimes a gentle emphasis on filling the sides and back of the ribcage is helpful. And then we're going to focus on that exhale and notice how on the exhale, the low T-spine or the bottom base ribs sink down towards the floor. So that exhale lets us drop the base of the rib cage to the floor, which in this orientation is to the back of the body. So we're really interested in how much can we soften the bottom of the rib cage to the back of the body. Then we're going to go into some pelvic tilting. So you can landmark those hip points and start to rock those hip points towards your ribs and a little bit away from the ribs. Those hip points come towards the ribs and away from the ribs. As the hip points come towards the ribs, you're in a posterior pelvic tilt. And as the hips come away from the ribs, you're in an anterior pelvic tilt. So as you go posterior, hips go towards ribs, and anterior, hips away from ribs. Trying to keep the neck and shoulders as relaxed as possible. Glutes and ab muscles are also fairly easy. Very low level connection there, but certainly no gripping or squeezing. And then every time you go into that posterior tilt, can you do it with an exhale? So the inhale, you go anterior, and the exhale, you go posterior. Inhale, anterior, and exhale, posterior. And with that posterior pelvic tilt, can you feel how the low T-spine sinks even more towards the floor? So every posterior tilt with exhale drops those back base ribs even closer to the floor. And you're making this as easy as possible, no effort, just letting it flow. Next, we're going to hold ourselves in a gentle posterior pelvic tilt. So the low back is flat and the low T-spine is towards the floor. Neck and shoulders are easy. And we're going to start to rotate the pelvis side to side. So imagine puppet strings on those hip points, and one puppet string goes up to the ceiling, and then the other puppet string goes up to the ceiling. You're going to keep this rotation as small as necessary to maintain that little posterior pelvic tilt and to remain relaxed through the neck and shoulders. So as the right hip point goes towards the ceiling, the left hip point drops towards the floor. As the left hip point goes towards the ceiling, the right hip point drops towards the floor. So softly you're turning that pelvis side to side. And just notice what happens in the spine when the pelvis turns left and what happens when the pelvis turns right. So hopefully you can feel that that low T-spine is also softly rotating, turning in the same direction as the pelvis. So when the left glute gets heavy, the left side of the low back and the low T-spine gets a little heavier to the floor as well. And then when the right glute gets heavy into the sit-fit or the balance cushion, the right low back, right low T-spine gets heavier as well. And you're just noticing that pressure change. You're not trying to force it. You're finding a range where above the pelvis feels relatively easeful. So neck, chest, shoulders, all relaxed as you turn that pelvis side to side. Come center with that pelvis You can let the pelvis come out of that posterior pelvic tilt into neutral. And you're going to lift the pelvis up and remove that balance cushion. Just have a little lie down and notice if you are now experiencing more contact between the lower T-spine and lower ribs than you were previously. So hopefully it feels like you're more spread out, both width-wise and lengthwise on the mat. All right, phase 2 is to get a little more rotation up the T-spine. So we're going to take our balance cushion, and this time it's going to go under the back of the ribs, in and around the shoulder blades. And we're going to get our head on a bit of an elevated surface so that we can comfortably rest head on block and ribs on sit fit. Now I have positioned myself at the sit fit a little too low, so I'm going to shift that up towards my head and see if I've got myself in a bit of a better position. Yeah. So we want the bottom ribs off of that cushion, off of that sit fit. And we're going to settle on to that sit fit and just see if we can let the base of the rib cage, again, imagine it moving towards the floor, towards the mat. All right. And then from here, we're going to reach those arms up, interlace the fingers, and we'll start to settle a little bit more, meaning ribs press just spontaneously down towards the mat. And with those arms on a little bit of a reach, with the back base ribs sinking towards the floor, we start to turn our ribs and our head over to one side and over to the other. So for our first variation, the head stays in line with the spine, and we let the whole thing rotate as a unit. So we're rotating that T-spine, and the head is coming along for the ride. You can think about your thumbs being in line with your breastbone and your nose being in line with your breastbone as well. And that'll keep you from overutilizing your shoulders, your arms and shoulders, and keep it quite focused on rotation through the ribs, which said differently could also be said as rotation through the thoracic spine. So here we're getting that rotation through the bottom third of the T-spine primarily. And then we're going to change things up. So let's come center. Your eyes are going to fix themselves at a spot on the ceiling, and you're going to rotate with a fixed head. So the ribs are still working to go side to side, but you're working in a range where the head can stay still. The thumbs stay lined up on top of the breastbone. And you can think of this turn coming from your breastbone, or if you can visualize it, turning from the middle of your thoracic spine. So sort of the middle third of the thoracic spine is what's helping us rotate in this variation. So we've done the bottom third, now we're exploring the middle third, come to center, and now lastly, we explore the top third. So this time, as the ribs rotate one direction, the head turns softly, maybe a third of your range in the other direction. And then the ribs go one way, and the head gently turns in the opposite direction. So now when you're in that rotation, the distance between the nose and the breastbone is farther apart. And just see if you can map out for yourself that you are now rotating or emphasizing the rotation in the top third of that thoracic spine. You're going to continue letting your low thoracic spine sink. You can think about it softening towards the mat. And you're trying to get a little bit of turning action through the upper thoracic spine without tensing or bracing through the pelvis or the low back, and without tensing or bracing through the neck and shoulders. We'll come to center, and we'll take our block away, take our sit fit away, or balance cushion. Come to lie down. Notice if you took an extra long breath like I did, where the air just seemed to fill up through that thoracic cage a little bit easier. And notice if we have increased how much length our ribs are taking up on the mat and how much width our ribs are taking up on that mat. So hopefully we've restored a little more curve, a little more productive roundedness in that thoracic spine. And then we'll come on up to a seated position. And you can do a little shoulder roll here and appreciate how your ribs are now in a more stacked position over top of your pelvis. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.